Okay, hi everyone, and thanks for joining. Just going to wait here for a moment to let everybody join us from the waiting room. So just hang tight for a couple of seconds, and then we will get started with the program shortly. All right, good morning, and welcome to our event on the strategic value of open innovation. Today, we're going to be having a conversation about engaging in open innovation. And this webinar is a joint production of BlueCallom and the World Innovations Forum. My name is Cleo, and I'm a product manager at BlueCallom, a neuroinnovation technology company. We're going to get started with the event shortly, but first, I'd like to run through some quick housekeeping items. For your information, we'll be recording this webinar and making it available to you in the next couple of days, so no need to take screenshots or take notes or anything like that. And secondly, if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please post them in the Zoom Q&A box or chat box, and we'll address the questions in a live question and answer session at the end of the webinar. So for today's event, I am joined by Axel Schulze, an experienced innovator and entrepreneur, to learn more about the practice of open innovation. Axel is founder and CEO of BlueCallom Group and chairman of the World Innovations Forum Foundation. He started and successfully exited 4 companies, the biggest reaching $5 billion in revenue, the second close to $1 billion, and is a published author and patent holder. In 2015, listed in the Global 100 Most Influential Startup Accelerators. In 2008, he won the San Francisco Entrepreneur Award. In 2006, he chaired the SaaS Channel Committee at SIIA, the leading trade association for the software industry in the US. He was also an early advisor at LinkedIn in 2003, spending the majority of his business life in Silicon Valley. Most recently, Axel has been on a quest to discover how the brain creates and processes ideas and how some ideas can disrupt an entire industry. So with that said, I'd like to welcome you, Axel, and thank you for being here and for sharing your insights with us today.
Thank you, Cleo. It's great to be here.
So I'd like to get started by talking about open innovation on a high level to make sure that everyone who's in the audience is on the same page as we're going through this topic today. So companies in today's world need to be innovative and adaptable in order to achieve the ultimate goal of sustainable competitive advantage. And companies need to be constantly innovating to achieve this. And there are, of course, different approaches to innovation and different types of innovation. And in this event, open innovation is the model that we'll be diving into today. So Henry Chesbrough, who is a researcher and an academic, who is dubbed also considered the father of open innovation, has described open innovation as a distributed innovation model that involves inflows and outflows of knowledge across organizational boundaries. But I'm curious, Axel, in your words, can you tell us a little bit about what is open innovation and what open innovation entails?
Yeah, I think it's actually a great and an important question, and I think that the description of what it is now is known, but when we see open innovation in context or in relations to what innovation is done or how innovation is done today, is probably the best way to describe the difference between open innovation. I think there is no word like closed innovation, but that would be probably the appropriate name. When you innovate openly, as the name indicates, so it's not just you and your team, it's actually people from the outside, and there's basically a scale of how to do that. One, it would be somebody from your customer base or from your business partner base that you include to your team. So the borderlines of the company basically are open, and that's open innovation. somebody from the outside coming in. Now, the degree of how open is an interesting aspect of open innovation, because it doesn't mean, okay, you have like on a website and now everybody in the world can basically participate. For many companies, that would be too big of a step, but there is some merit to it, and we'll probably talk about this a little bit. But the openness to other people than your own is basically the difference between open innovation and closed innovation, where it's just your team. Some people have, I mean, security tracts around their innovation centers so that nothing leaks out, and it's done very secretively. And there is some understanding from the IP perspective. There's another understanding, because if you're a public company and you expose your ideas and concepts that you're working in, then as a CEO, for instance, you are requested to do these forward-looking statements. That means this is what we are going to do, dear investors, and you have to do this with all investors at the same time. So there's a rigorous process of openness in a public company. However, there are reasons we'll talk about later on why this is actually utterly important to get these steps done, because you can't say, well, we can't do it because we're a public company. That would be wrong. I mean, point and flat out wrong. And so I think that's probably my best determination of what open actually means.
Great. So to kind of review what you've just said and maybe expand a little bit on that, just for our audience as well, there are two main types or models of open innovation, and those can be considered outside in and inside out. So outside in open innovation involves accessing and using external knowledge or technology and ideas, as Axel has just mentioned, from external parties, and bringing that within your organization's innovation process. And as he alluded to with intellectual property, there is also inside out open innovation, and that involves sharing internal knowledge, ideas, technology, or resources with external actors. So I thought that would be good to just discuss a little bit. Mm-hmm. And then you also mentioned closed innovation as a counterpoint to open innovation. So to provide a little bit more context, I thought it would be interesting to discuss what the closed innovation model looks like.
Okay. So when you're closed innovation, there are two critical factors. One is, number one, you don't get the insights of your customer other than somebody reaches out and makes some interviews, not even mentioning what you're working on, to get some feedback from the market. Now, the developed countries have the added disadvantage that many companies cannot even reach out to the customers, because the customers are GDPR protected. Many companies don't even know the customers, because a customer is a person and their data is personal data. And so you can send them an email, you can't even call them. So on the innovation side, we probably made it a step too far, but I don't want to go into the politics of privacy protection and so on, because there is also, seriously, there is a reason for. But there are these areas, and innovation is one of them, where the closed innovation is almost forced to be closed. And when you think about the innovation process itself, we learned, probably most of you know that we're deeply involved in the neuroscience development. We learned that when you get ideas, that you don't just get them, it's not a random process, but there is past experiences that lead to ideas. Now, the biggest experience holder in this whole game is actually the customer. Now, we also know that the customer having, and this is with many people, having a problem, have also a hard time to solving it themselves. Many reasons, I don't want to go into details, but the problem owner is actually the problem in two ways. Well, first, it has the problem, but also he cannot solve it right away. I mean, some do, but more don't. And so if you get to the root cause of the problem, it's obvious that the customer plays an important role. Now, if we put the customer into the game, that would mean the customer needs to be part of the inner circle of innovation. And when we have open innovation, then we don't need to have that process, because the process would mean NDAs, all kinds of documents and contracts. And the more creative and the more open a customer is, the less likely they want to go through all this paperwork. And so closed innovation has the limitation that we can't get to the experiences of a customer in a way that we can actually and seriously innovate. And this is best seen with startups. Startups don't have customers. This is the biggest disadvantage over any kind of corporate. So what they need to do in order to get to this knowledge is actually talk to people who can potentially be a customer. And they have and take the time to interview them back and forth to completely understand the problem. This is the core reason, or the main reason, why startups can be far more easily be disruptive than a corporate, even though they have the customers they cannot talk to, while the others don't have them. And because they don't have them, they find them and can talk to them. So there's an inherited problem sort of in our political structure for innovation. And the biggest push for innovation comes from actually developed countries, because they see the need, they see the disruption. The disruption comes from anywhere, and they cannot do anything because of that structure. In the closed innovation model, you basically have to go through all kinds of legal processes to innovate, because the internal team, lacking the experience of the customer, can only vaguely think of what could it be. The second biggest problem is an understanding in the ideation process itself. And here comes again the closed innovation problem accelerates, because we think in order to build a solution for a major problem, we need the experts. Now, practice has shown that the experts are limiting themselves based off their knowledge about a solution for a problem. While if we have a diverse team of salespeople, of marketing people, of anything but experts, they don't know what the problem's boundaries are. They say, wouldn't that be ideal if we could do that? And if all agree, yeah, that would be cool, this is what we need to do, then this is the point where innovation possibly gets realized. But if these people are not part of the inner circle, then they don't even come to this idea. So closed innovation has two aspects of limitation. One is sort of not getting the insight from the customer. And the second is not getting actually even the insight from the internal people because of the selection of the innovation team. So there are two criticalities that everybody really needs to focus on when they start to be really innovative.
Interesting. Yeah. And I think your point about user interaction also provides a great segue into this next topic that I wanted to discuss with you, which is why companies pursue open innovation. And as you've already touched upon, user interaction and having access to customer base is a huge benefit. But I would love to hear from you, and maybe we can discuss some of the reasons why companies pursue open innovation and the benefits of this approach to innovation.
Yeah. So I had an interesting conversation with somebody from a large energy provider, and the person I talked to, and this is one thing about interesting thing about innovation in general, it is very person specific. So the person itself was a typical innovator, as you can think of, these people who were working, in great details on something, but have also the ability to jump up and not even the sky is the limit. And so what I learned here, the motive for getting to open innovation is actually put pressure publicly on the situation that we need the customer feedback and the customer involvement. And open innovation, we talked about inside out and outside in, has this aspect of a two-way street. And so he said to me, okay, we will try. We need your help to have a conversation with our C-level executives, public company, very big, and we need your help to make sure that obviously that we're complying to the law, compliance reasons, and so on, and but also leverage this critical feedback from the market. And the market is typically more than just the current customers. I mean, the market is also these customers you never found or you never got to because of reasons, innovation is actually in place. So you have these two anchor points, the market in itself with non-customers, with possible business partners, with alliances, with associations, with all kinds of people. And then you have obviously the customer themselves. Now, and the inside out effect is now a dual play. You will want to get the insights from the outside, I mean, from the customer base and from those who couldn't be your customer, who didn't want to because your solution was not innovative enough. So that is a flow that people really, really want. They realize today more than ever that is needed because you cannot innovate internally just for yourself. And just a little different example, it was a big insurance company, global player, 5 years of innovation hubs, multiple across the planet. Now, his concern was that he wants to shut it down. He said, we spend millions and millions and millions. I don't even want to tell you how much, but there was nothing innovative coming out. 5 years, nothing. And I said, don't make that step too quickly because you're not the only one. I don't actually know anybody that we were working with, and these are all, Fortune 1000 companies who actually had a creative, innovative solution just by having the team thinking about something. And so they understand that the feedback from the outside, this is good. So we'll think about that. But then there is something from the inside out. And this was in my own experience. So I have to say I was embarrassed about our product to give this already out to the customers because it wasn't really ready. And I wanted to have, typical German, I want to have a perfect product. And our investors told me, this was in Silicon Valley, so we were just young there many years ago. And he said, no, actually, you know what? Give it to your customers, select in the best possible customer for a innovative product. I said, how would I do that? He said, these are so-called early adapters. These are people who are jumping on brand new solutions early on. The number is very, very small, but these are the ones who can help you best because they have a love for actually shaping your product. Because if they think that your product is going to be really, really helpful for them and they can shape it, so they actually have somebody who builds a product for them for free. They buy the product later on as a normal product. And so I realized that the inside out effect is of great advantage. And as a public company, what somebody needs to do is simply stand up and saying, okay, we're developing a new product in this direction, and we will actually publicly announce it herewith and talk to customers about their problem, and this is how we develop it. There's one guy who is basically also a startup person. I mean, Elon Musk, even though he has now a big public company, but he does this regularly. Forward-looking statement, we're doing this. Interestingly enough, and this is why at least for the next 10 years, probably no risk to share your strategic development plans because nobody cares from your competitors. They say, come on, crazy, never gonna work. A disruptive idea is so difficult to understand for a normal person that everybody says that is crap. Sorry, my language. And if you understand the inner works of disruption, it means you change the way people do things. That's our definition. You change, in most of the cases, in the long term, the way people do business in that specific industry segment. And this is too much for most people, and this has nothing to do with intelligence or lack of intelligence. For most people, this is too hard to grasp. They need to go for weeks, basically understanding all the aspect of it. And executives don't have that time to figure out what somebody does. And so disruption, particularly disruptive ideas, is an inside out and an outside in advantage for the company of, I mean, the advantages couldn't be greater. And now there comes something else from that part. If you share a disruptive, I mean, truly disruptive innovation to the outside, the disruption comes over the next couple of years. There's never in humanity be a disruptive product that you launched and it was instantly globally successful. It cannot be, because most people are more conservative, they're more careful. They wait until the most people, use it and then finally step on this too. 3 years window. In this 3 years window, you get an amazing advantage over your competitors in the market. And if they then copy you, what are they? Followers, making you a leader. And a leader can't be a leader without followers. So you will actually want to have others copy you in order to become a leader. And now you begin to probably realize that all the IP protection that costs you not only hundreds of millions of dollars, legal and security teams, and I mean all this stuff, not only it costs you the money, but it costs you the competitive advantage to develop something the market really needs, because you don't know, because you don't care, you don't share with others. So open innovation becomes a strategic vehicle that has nothing to do with closeness, only to do with openness, because the closeness is the killer factor. You just believe that you need to protect your IP. But think of it, when Elon Musk, when the Airbnb guys, when you name it, including my own company, Computer 2000, still today people ask me, what was actually your success? And this was 35 years ago. They could not figure out what was it that made you a 15,000 Deutschmark startup, a multi-billion-dollar company, 37 billion last year. How was this possible? And it was possible because the combination of a product innovation, of the business model innovation, is so hard to completely understand over time, because it isn't at the first day what it is 3 years and 5 years and 10 years later. So I can only encourage you to not worry about IP protection. You will need to worry about not getting copiers, because it doesn't make you an industry leader. So I mean, long answer, but really take the openness very, very serious.
And these are all very important and relevant points that you've made as well about the importance of open innovation. And to that, I would also just like to add that, particularly outside in open innovation, so when we're sourcing external ideas or technology from the outside and bringing it into our own innovation process, can often save us time and reduce our costs of innovation, because we're taking a preformed idea or a preformed technology and then implementing that into our company and the innovation process, instead of having to start from scratch. So that's also a big pro and big benefit of embracing an open innovation concept.
Yeah,
Is there
absolutely.
anything or any other benefits that you can see about using open innovation?
I think, I mean, there are lots of little ones, and we could probably build a list, but I would actually suggest for pretty much anybody who considers this, really look at the big parts, the big advantages. And this is like Cleo, like you said, I mean, it is a cost advantage. When you look how long people basically try in their closed environment to come up with an idea and what that cost versus I have an idea, I want to check it with the audience, and you can do this almost right after the idea. I mean, in our process, we start with the we call it the needs and dreams analysis. We want to know from the customers what are their real needs. I mean, that's pretty easy to find, but even more important, the dreams, because the dreams is forward looking, is in the future, and if you can build those dreams, you will become disruptive almost without doing anything. I mean, a little bit exceeded, but and then we start with the ideation process, the neural ideation process, and right after we go back to the customers and say, hey, this is what we came up with. What do you think? And that time and cost reduction of years to weeks of maybe 15, 10 million, 5 million to almost nothing is, I mean, totally significant. And everything else is almost gravy.
So now that you've mentioned the needs and dreams analysis and neuroideation, for those of you who might not know, Axel is the developer of Deep Innovation Design, which is an innovation methodology based in neuroscience principles. And it's also very focused on collaborating with external parties like customers and partners. So I think it would be really interesting to hear a bit more, Axel, your philosophy on why to engage with customers early on in the ideation process and in the innovation process. Maybe how does it work in the deep innovation design method?
Okay, yeah. So I think, I mean, I can share one of our internal test cases, for instance, because this is where we are, I mean, literally closest. So we had a test case for testing the application. I mean, we want to do our pre-release bug testing. We picked a random topic. This was UI. I mean, for every software company, UI is important. So, you know, let's play. We want to disrupt UI. It was not even the goal. The goal was to test the application and the process flow, and that we can work with that process easily. None of us were UI experts. None of us were IT experts. We were coming from marketing, from product marketing, bookkeeping. I mean, the whole team, very much like any startup. Now the results completely blew me off. I mean, it was stunning what we came up with about what is the future of user experience and user interfaces. And so we realized that the neural ideation process, unlike we originally thought, it is good for enterprises who don't have the original super creative entrepreneurs anymore. I mean, like Mercedes doesn't have a Carl Benz anymore, and Robert Bosch doesn't have a Robert Bosch anymore. And I thought, okay, but for this audience, it's good, and the entrepreneurs will probably not need our application. And people consider me a very creative, I mean, 4 companies, all disruptive business models, innovative products. How did you do that, and so forth? I realized that even this team with not even a purpose to develop something amazing, were actually through this process guided to getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And we completely debunked the understanding of, yeah, ideas come randomly, and the big ideas, I mean, takes forever that somebody may have that. Not true. Absolutely not. And we were not entrepreneurs. We were, except me, we were normal people like everybody else. Smart, but normal. We have cool thinkers, but not, you know, scientists or so. And what happened in this process was we basically learned, like Cleo said, from neuroscience, how our mind actually solves problems. And there are a couple varieties. If you are in danger, you know, your brain at high speed looks for a solution. You don't do that. You as the human being, it is literally your brain cells and your neurons that fire in extreme speed with extreme amount of data. And this is why people in a crash, when they see this is probably could be deadly, they see this entire process in retrospect in like in a like it would be an hour, but it was 2 seconds until you crashed in something. And this is how our brain works. So when we understand the behavior of our brain, I'm always saying this is more important than how our 86 billion neurons work, because we probably never understand that. When we understand the behavior, we can stimulate it. And the neuroideation process is a series of stimuli, from warming up the brain to analogous ideas, to idea confluence. So idea confluence, for those who can't really grasp with it or deal with it, is the confluence, like the rivers flow together into one main big stream, is when ideas come from all corners. Like Cleo had an idea, other employees had an idea, and so on. Now, if we translate this now to open innovation, if it's not just the 7 or 10 of us who were in this project, but it's maybe 100, you get a flow of ideas. And here comes a radical cut to everything we know about. I mean, I was a believer in brainstorming. I was a believer in design thinking and so on. But rather than picking the 5 or 10 best ideas, we pick them all. We may pick up hundreds, if not thousands, idea pieces. And this is the same process like we did as entrepreneurs intuitively. But in this time now, we do it purposefully, understanding from a science point of view why this is actually a good idea, not just, okay, these guys could do it, but I cannot do it. Everybody who has a brain, all 3 pounds of weight, all certain energy consumption, all 86 billion neurons, our brains are the same. They're differently wired, but they're the same. So we can all become radically innovative if we know how to do that. And so if we learn one thing on top of everything, then it's to collaborate on an intellectual basis with others. That is what we have not done yet. But when AI systems start to collaborate, knowing how our brain does this, and we built AI, so therefore it will do the same thing, that will become yet another major leap for AI. But we will never be threatened by AI. I can tell you that. And I would have told you otherwise probably 3 years ago. I would say, yeah, if this goes on, then we will be outperformed by AI machines. But I learned so much. And I mean, this is just sort of on the side, brackets. Think about neuroscience. You will be blown away. And you don't need to be a neuroscientist when you learn what actually happens in our mind that is far beyond any even wildest dreams about AI. But when we understand the behavior, then we can build things together with others and their inputs. And now comes something extremely important. I think probably the most or the biggest advantage of OpenAI. If you and your team, 10, 20, 50 people, doesn't matter, and 100, 200, 500 of your customers work together, and you collect all these bits and pieces of ideas, there's only one output out of all of this, and this may be output X. Whatever it is, doesn't matter. Now, if your competitor uses the same methodology and does exactly the same thing, the output will be absolutely and with 100% certainty completely different. Because their 200 customers and our 200 customers and our people and our background ideas and experiences are different. It must be a different product. It cannot even be the same. So the beauty is that we're actually entering a time with open innovation where we have probably an even bigger variety of things than we have today. Because what happens today, if you look at cars from like 50 years ago, they looked all very different. Today, what is this? Is this a Toyota? Is this a BMW? What car was this? I don't know. We copied from each other so much that we ended up being the same. I mean, we all have now leather seats. We all have, disc brakes. We all have more than 100 horsepower engines. We have all a leather steering wheel. We have, you make the list. It's all the same. The only differentiator is the brand. Now, that is at the point when we learn, okay, the brand is important, but then there comes a Tesla and rips it all apart. We had the Hiltons, we had the whatever the hotels were, all the same. Now there comes Airbnb, rips it all apart because the customers don't want the hotel anymore. At least right now, 30%. I mean, imagine 30% of your market share goes over the next 10 years away to somebody else who completely rips the ideas apart. And that is why the C-level is so critical about innovation and why it is indeed critical, but also the way you do it is critical. And if you don't do it in an open environment, you get stuck with your internal things where nothing but improvement can come out. And improvement is good, but you will want innovation once in a while. Not every day, but you will learn probably every 2 to 3 years. Because the number of people who become entrepreneurs and who disrupt markets is growing like never before. And I hope this was probably the key driver to open innovation and your future.
Yep. Particularly to stay competitive, innovation is especially important now more than ever, as you mentioned, with so many recent technological developments. But Axel, previously you have written that open innovation is often dismissed due to the fear that any perceived secrets could leak to the public. And I think that this is a great statement, and I would like to explore that a little bit. So let's talk about the perceived risks of open innovation. And from your experience, what concerns companies the most about embracing an open innovation strategy?
Yeah, I think the reason what concerns companies most, the most important thing there is to find out the reason why are they concerned. I mean, the obvious, yeah, I mean, somebody's copying what we do, and we want to protect our development that we put, I mean, enormous amount of money into a development of a new product. And relative to the size of the company, it's somewhere between 5 to 10% of basically the turnover of the company. So the cost structure is growing for those who want to stay on top. And so that the competition, grabs it and really literally copies it right away, that fear is amazingly high, rightfully. However, what comes out, and that is so fiercely competitively protected, has never been an innovation. You protect your improvements, even though these improvements are expensive. If you look into the pharmaceutical industry, the automobile industry, the airline industry, even though they have very different problems right now, but on a grand scheme of things, gigantic investments in the next generation of products, which are essentially improvements, nothing disruptive. And the stock market or the capital market in general is actually looking for the degree of development of a company in order to determine a value of the company. And since 20 years, we see some capital markets, particularly in the US, but recently in China, that they have the same behavior. They look into absolutely new ideas, analyze to death, and they do this extremely well with an extreme precision. Whether this or that development over the next 5 to 10 years will be a major leap. Average Joe says, well, totally overvalued. I mean, totally crazy that Tesla right now is 10 times as much with like a Mercedes. I don't care. This is ridiculous. And the denial process in your mind says, stop thinking about it. This is ridiculous, period, end over the story. I don't accept. Because another piece of neuroscience, denial is something when you think, I cannot believe it, I don't want to believe it, and therefore you deny it. However, we denied, recently, very recently, and still deny Tesla. We denied Google. We denied Facebook. We denied LinkedIn. We denied Microsoft. We denied Intel. Way before we denied IBM, we at one time denied the reason why Mercedes exists. So the pattern is very obvious. Disruptive ideas will be rejected by the majority of people in the beginning. It cannot be that somebody comes up with something so radical, I don't believe it's working. So the too good to be true effect is now these days a capital markets feature, saying, too good to be true. Let's see, let's analyze. Will they be able to build these batteries to do this? Will they find more and more luxury apartments and even houses and even villas to rent over our platform, so that the whole scale of from, I rent my kids' room to I rent a $10 million villa. Will that work? Never, ever. People who have a 10 million villa will not rent it out. Well, they do today. They even buy villas just to rent it out. The market has shifted. The hotel industry lost 30% of globally. The whole industry, not just one hotel, 30% of their market. And you look into Nestle. Nestle is one of my kind of favorite example because it's the only disruptive innovation from a corporate big enterprise. I couldn't find anybody. So if you know some, let me know. I'd be seriously interested to find at least a few more. So, but they changed the way coffee consumption. People build coffee machines, for the aluminum capsules and so on. In the beginning, crazy, aluminum, nobody wants this, probably taste it and so on. And today it's a major business. And it's not only the machines are built for the capsules, but the aluminum is improved in order to taste good and even be recyclable. Then we found out, well, aluminum could actually be recycled to, I don't know exactly. So it's better than 90%. So there are so many things that has evolved over time. Then in, these days, it's there. Now back to the risk. In the beginning, it was also for Nestle. It was a risk to do that, but willing to take a major risk is basically part of the innovation. And that's what prevents disruptive innovation to be actually even entered and distributed to the outside. Now, if you put all the feedback from the market together, and the feedback tells you, well, everybody of this class of early adapters would want it, then it indicates that if this class wants it, because these are also in many cases, other people look at, then there's a next step. It's not the rest of the population, but there's a next group after the early adapters that come into play. Jeff Moore wrote a very cool book, which is actually as valuable, if not more, than it was, 40 years ago or so, Crossing the Chasm. It was particularly written for startups, how you get into the market, little guy. But now it's, interestingly enough, it's even more important for corporates, crossing the chasm. Cross that borderline from crazy small market early adapters basically into the public market. And there comes, I think, 4 or 5 steps until the laggards come in at the end. So for you as somebody from the enterprise, there's some here, you will need to understand 2 things. One, open innovation, and you will learn either way, the hard way or the trust way, is the key to disruptive innovation, number 1. Number 2, if you have disruptive innovation discovered, you discovered something that will be successful sooner or later, your key skill that you need to develop is to communicate this internally to your CEO and CFO. They're both naturally and rightfully rather conservative because they cannot jump on every idea somebody comes of 100 and 200,000 employee company. So you need to develop the skill to tell them why in the next 2 to 5 years this will be successful, and in the next 5 to 10 years it will actually have shaken up already without noticing today the industry. This is the pattern of every single unicorn on earth. It is the pattern of any single disruptive innovator, whether it was 1880 something or it's 2025, it doesn't matter. There is a pattern that is beyond technology and development cycles. The pattern is actually recognition and comprehension of the population, and that is different. And if you deal with the comprehension span of your customers, then you need to look for those who can, and then you look for the next generation. I mean, not annually, but sort of the next layer, and then to the next layer until you come to the laggards who finally also buy it because everybody else bought it. But that is when you scale your business from zero to, multi-billion dollars. You have, fortunately, you have the time, because we would not have the ability to even scale this over a shorter period of time. No.
It's really interesting that you're talking about the internal dynamics between people working in a company when open innovation is a strategy. And I'd actually like to explore that a bit further from the company culture perspective. So, of course, to source ideas outside an organization or even share ideas from within an organization, it requires a level of transparency and trust, and the mindset and just the attitude that open innovation is an accepted form of innovation. So, do you have a perspective or do you have advice for companies with a more conservative innovation culture, as you've mentioned? Maybe the management that might be a little bit more protective, and how to go about this when embracing an open innovation strategy. How do you shift the culture to support open innovation? And it's a pretty broad question.
It's a broad, and it's probably one of the most challenging questions of all. And I mean, I've been oftentimes asked about innovation culture, and I have to say up front, there is no one universal answer for that, at least not yet. Because and this is what I did, I try to study culture development. I mean, not just within a company or within a topic like innovation, but culture development in general. And culture development is a broad and complex topic because it's very much influenced by all kinds of situations. Take COVID-19. I mean, we had the culture was we work all together in one office structure. We have to be there at latest 9 o'clock, ideally 8 o'clock, sometimes 7 o'clock, and we can go at 5 o'clock. We didn't have the freedom to say, okay, I take 2 hours during the day and I'll work a little bit at night because the rest kids are sleeping and what have you. Now, this was not acceptable. And there was one force, a virus, within 12 months has shifted our entire office collaboration behavior fundamentally within 12 months. This would under no circumstances be possible if somebody would have said, well, let's do that. Because people try since, I think, 30 years developing this more open concept. Now, and this shows that cultural development under certain influences and pressure can be radically changed very, very quickly, but it can also take eons. I mean, our culture has evolved over, what is it now, 300,000 years as Homo sapiens in the genetic form as we are, 5 million years since Homo something sort of popped up on the history charts. Now, when we look at how we do things, we're still influenced, at least from the last 300,000 years, to a certain degree. Women could not vote in a political vote in Switzerland till 1957, where you think, what? I mean, what is this? Well, this was the culture. Culturally, we were able to, and thought this is totally okay, to really beat dogs to death because if they don't perform. Today, unimaginable. Today we go into zoos where we think, yeah, this is cool. We want to educate our kids about the variety of all these animals. Now, if we think 200 years forward, let's assume our children get abducted by aliens. This is the very same situation because they want to see how humans look like. For us, it would be terrible. If we think about that, after a while, we get to more and more and more thinking, we realize, Zeus, this is an unacceptable situation, but we still do it. Culturally, okay. Even our ethics model says it's okay. Our, way of life, this is acceptable. We do that. And so innovation culture falls into this overall structure of cultural development. Now, when the first couple companies got disrupted, one after the other, industry after the other, well, the push for innovation grew. I mean, we saw this. We simply exist because of this push. My personal, lifestyle wasn't to start a new company and dive deep into neuroscience. And I mean, just not. But it was so interesting, and I realized it is such a tremendous human development when we go into innovation. But like I said earlier, one of the biggest aspects is actually the culture. People say, no, we don't need this. Others say, well, it's too risky. Yet others say, I don't want to take the responsibility if something, some shareholder come and say, hey, you should have told us. And taking responsibility is also part of that cultural aspect, because the innovation manager, knowingly or not today, but sooner or later they will know, they will be actually responsible, not by order, you are responsible for that, but they feel the responsibility that the future of the company, particularly large, 100,000 people enterprises, to some extent is on their shoulders. If there's a disruptive company coming in and wipes out from 30,000 of the 100,000 employees, then some people say, shit, sorry if I say that, but we should have done this, and I actually would have been able to do that. And this is a thought that most people don't realize today, but it will come for sure, because this is something that entrepreneurs, when they screw up their companies or when the market goes south, the responsibility for their team is amazing. When we had a near-death experience, so to speak, when the internet bubble burst, and we had to keep the company together no matter what it cost. We sold our houses and everything to make it happen. And so culture, again, under entrepreneurs, you say, yeah, it's your company, it's your blah, blah, blah. You have to do that. But it continues forward into these entrepreneurs. And so when we go to open innovation, then the question arises, what is the cultural aspect of open innovation? And there pops one thing that I would say is a really good starting point to shift culture, is when we become very conscious about the fact that ideas are not born out of our amazing intelligence. They're born from past experiences. That's a fact we know, because the cells cannot create something. So past experience is almost always something with other people and the inputs of the rest of the world since we exist. So the question is, do we even own the ideas that we have? And this is a debate, very philosophical. I don't want to go into that, but that is a question that arises under almost every neuroscientist and almost every entrepreneur. So now the next step comes that there is no innovation ever created that did not build on innovations that have been created before. That means that we can only build on other people's ideas something that is extraordinary going forward. Tiny little things we can obviously do anytime. Little improvements, my idea, I did this, wonderful. But big things, the companies I built, the companies all the entrepreneurs built who build big companies are built on top of other things. In Silicon Valley is a statement that every entrepreneur knows: you are stepping on the shoulder of others. Never forget that. And in the beginning, I thought, a little bit pathetic, but no, it is not. It is the origin of innovation. And that very fact shall help us understand the more we can step on other people's shoulders and the more we make them part of it and have one way or the other a bit of the ownership, the better will the innovation become. So open innovation has cultural aspects, all the functional all the commercial aspects, but also that cultural aspect. Now, the big question is then, who owns the idea? Well, it is indeed a big question that is currently discussed amongst the European and also the US patent offices when AI systems, there was an application that somebody put in about the AI that he built has actually built a garbage can. Very unique, very intelligent. So it could have been patented, but it was rejected because it was not from a human. So the discussion right now is, should an AI be at least in context of the human, or what should be the ownership? Now, the question comes when somebody says, I had this idea, I want to be part of it. I request sort of part of ownership of this product or so. And this is where we all need to work together to make this a standard. But right now, you are best off having an NDA with a AP waiver from your incoming customer saying, okay, I waive the rights on the IP that I will provide during that process. That's something we came up with, actually with our lawyer, and that's a recommendation we will make. And we did something else. In the application now, it wasn't in the beginning, we have a little button that says, this idea inspired me. So this is our way of shifting that culture in a more aggressive way than just saying, hey, you know, we're stepping on the shoulders of others. And what it does, that if Cleo, for instance, inspired me for a thought based on what she wrote as an idea, I said, hey, this is cool. I could actually, you know, if we do this way, it could be even better. So she gets gamification, she gets points. I get points that I actually committed that it was built on Cleo's idea. So our innovation culture is becoming basically building something that steps on other people's shoulder, make both heroes. And when we look at the points, you know, that people aggregated by doing things in the application, there is a very, you know, visible thing. Oh, he used ideas from many people. That's actually smart, because this is augmenting, you know, the richness of the repository of ideas. And oh, there's these people who actually contribute the ideas in the first place. That makes teamwork and collaboration to a new degree very, very interesting, because we begin to realize it's not just teamwork. Yeah, we were all on the same team and it was a lot of fun, but obviously I was the big guy. Everybody thinks this in almost every team. But when we truly realize we can only do this together, then the question is, why not asking customers to join, who have the problem, who know more about the problem than anybody else? So the consequence is disruptive innovation without opening up the process to customers and business partners and, you know, whoever's appropriate for your business is almost impossible. I hope
So
that
perfect.
statement
Yeah.
sticks.
And we
Yeah.
are running just up against the clock.
Yeah.
So while we're still on this topic of open innovation, I think now would be a great opportunity, Axel, to share some information to everybody about a really great opportunity to participate in an open innovation initiative at a global level. And so Axel will share with you some words about this initiative for World Innovations Day.
Okay, sure. Thank you. I know we're a little bit late. I will just take 2 minutes. What we're doing is on April 21, which is World Innovations Day, originally by other people already ignited. The United Nations really pushed it forward. We put it forward with our foundation, the World Innovations Forum. And so we want to show and demonstrate to the world that groundbreaking innovation is possible in 40 days. So what people over 5 years didn't even come close to, we know for fact, otherwise we wouldn't risk our reputation. We can get probably 50% at least of the teams who join to a groundbreaking innovation in 40 days. And groundbreaking innovation clearly is not just the idea. We have developed this formula: innovation equals to ideation times execution square. meaning the escalation and the exponential growth of the value of innovation comes with execution and not by the idea, but the idea is the base thing. We can't go without it. And we want to demonstrate it. So if you have a team or you are a team who want to show and play with the concept of creativity in every human, simply join us. We start, as I said, on April 21. We will provide trainings to that everybody's on the same level, so to speak, and then go for 8 weeks. And there's 2 categories. One is startups. They can win up to $20,000. And there's the corporate teams who we will arrange a meeting with the CFO of your company. So that's part of the company deal we do with your company. Startups and other teams will get in front of about 900 investors. This is our global investor network. $20,000 is a price. And there are 2 Ingenuity Cups, one for the startups and individual teams, and one for the corporates. And we have that rocket because the rocket is kind of a symbol for rocket stars. But we will have a very nice prize and trophy to be won. I don't want to go through all the details of the timeline in the interest of time, but we had this concept: apply, start, win. We want to make it super simple. You apply in a form. We ask for somewhere between, I think, $10 and $100, depending on startup or enterprise, just to make sure that this is a serious interest. And then we have the timeline between April 21 till June 22, where we have the reward ceremony. The reward ceremony will be a jury from us, including some sponsors. We have 49% of the voting rights. Another 49% will have the public. So we don't want to have these, oh yeah, this guy won because of that. And there's 2% of the voting rights who have all the participants in the contest. So everybody in the contest who said, well, I mean, we saw these guys working. They were amazing. Nobody noticed that they did this and that. So if there should there be sort of a on par situation between the public and us, so they're basically moving the needle to the right or to the left. So there is no influence from anything or everybody. So we try to make this as cool as possible. And you simply find us, go to vday.org, and you will be rerouted to worldinnovationsforum.org, vforum.org/vday. And this is where you can apply. Also, those of you who want to help us with this, I mean, we really need any support from any helping hand, whether this is volunteer support, monetary support, mental support. It really doesn't matter. When you say, hey, this is cool, I support that, I don't have time to really do anything, but I commit to be one of your supporters, please register as well. So it would mean a lot to us. And that's basically the concept. And we ask all the teams to do an open innovation project, inviting basically as many as they want or as little as they want. There's no borderline. It doesn't matter what they want to innovate. The only requirement is that they start from scratch. They have not worked on this project before. Some may have. I mean, we can't really look into the brain exactly, but something that is not out in the public, and go full speed 40 days and get to a disruptive innovation.
Thank you. And before we sign off for today, I thought we could review one question that we received during the presentation, and then we'll wrap things up. So it would be great to hear how to find the right customers to include in your open innovation project.
Okay, as I said, it's the so-called early adapters. And these are people who have sort of a relatively public appearance of doing things earlier than everybody else. There is a whole list, and we could go through the details. It isn't like, okay, it's not signed on their signature on the emails that I'm an early adopter. This may come in the future, but this is the pattern: is people who you can see in your customer base, or even if you don't have one, you can see they're jumping on things far earlier than others. And if you have your preferred audience, then you look into that preferred audience. I would say, don't make the mistake to see the entire world as a new playing field and you consider everything, because that would mean you consider nothing. I mean, 8 billion people, it wouldn't make sense. Look for your own capabilities and then solve a problem in that field where your capabilities are already really well developed, because otherwise you would first learn about the product and then learn to solve it. And that's probably not going to happen.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Okay.
much for all of your insight today, and we hope that everybody in our audience enjoyed. And if you have any follow-up questions or interest in joining our Global Open Innovation Project on World Innovations Day, please sign up. It would be so cool to have you on board. And that concludes our presentation for today. So thank you again, and feel free to follow us on social media on LinkedIn, Twitter, and on Facebook. So on behalf of both the BlueCallom and World Innovations Forum teams, thank you again and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Thanks, Cleo. Super.